While many pastors and church leaders enjoy the act of actually preaching, what can become a drag on us is the week in, week out effort of having to actually write a sermon. And so today on Practical Church Planting, we're going to give you 4 ways to make the sermon writing process more enjoyable.
Welcome back to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we'll give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement to help you plant and grow healthy churches. My name is Brian Androsian, and joining me is Dylan Dodson, and today we're talking about 4 ways to make sermon writing more enjoyable.
So recently in the Practical Church Planting Facebook group,
Which you should join.
You should definitely join. I put a poll, and I said, what is your favorite thing about preaching?
Yeah.
Is it preaching the actual sermon? Which was the most votes? The second most votes was studying and learning about the sermon. Mm-hmm. But you know what? There's a couple options there. You want to know what didn't get any votes?
I'm dying to know.
Writing the actual sermon. And I'm right there. I love the actual preaching part of it. If you could just implant it in my brain, I'd preach 52 weeks out of the year. I even enjoy the studying and learning. Like, I love learning about the passage, but actually putting it together in the sermon, it can be frustrating and hard sometimes. And so,
sure.
Unsurprisingly, nobody voted for it, which means we should do an episode on how to make it a little bit more enjoyable for you.
That's what I heard.
And so here are 4 things you can do. Number 1, this is something that everybody says and that most people don't do. And I would say most people don't do because I didn't even do it until January. So almost like 20 months in the New City Church, I never actually took this seriously. And that is guard your sermon writing time. So put it in the calendar and don't let anyone touch it.
Don't negotiate.
And I know it's really easy, especially in church planting world, to be like, oh, well, I'm going to meet with anyone whenever they're available. Mm-hmm. And that was me for the longest time. And then I found that, like, just as a side note, when you're talking about meeting people, if you just say, hey, I'm available at this time and this time,
right,
a lot of times they'll pick one instead of just saying whenever you want.
Yep.
Or like I would, try to spread it out or something would, and basically I was like, no, January, I'm going to do it and I'm not going to let anyone touch it. And it has been, the last 8, 6, 7 weeks, however long it's been, has made it way more enjoyable because I know I have this time. I'm not going to do anything with it. And if you preach every week, like that is one of the biggest contributions you can give to your church, is doing the best that you can.
Yeah.
And so actually guarding your time and not changing it, even though I know it feels hard to do, especially when you're smaller and you're new and there's all these things you want to do, but it will make you less stressed out and it'll make your sermons better if you're more relaxed and engaged when you're actually writing them.
Yeah. Back on episode... Man, it had to be like 5 or under, something like that. We did an episode on block scheduling. I have no clue what we called the episode, so good luck finding it. But on
I think it was about productivity.
Yes, something about productivity. But about how you should block schedule your week and fill out pretty much every half hour worth of time with what you're going to be doing. And if you do that, especially with writing sermon or really with anything, whether it's something that you enjoy doing or not, it'll be much easier to guard that time if you have it planned in your schedule. If you kind of... I'll fit it in around meetings with other people, or I have other stuff going on, so I'll fit it in wherever I can, or even if that's not even your thought process, but if you don't have it written down, you're so much less likely to do it at a time where you're going to do it effectively.
Yep.
More likely to do it at a time where you're dragging in the afternoon, if that's you, and which is just going to make it even more.
Yeah, so like you said, put it in your calendar, and you can't do anything. But then also, not only just put it in your calendar, which is what I did, but then don't change it.
Yeah, stick to your calendar.
Stick to it.
Yes.
That might be the most helpful thing. And I know everyone's like, says they do it, but in my experience, a lot of people don't actually do it.
Yeah.
Guard your time. It'll make it be way better for you, way less stressful. So that's number 1. Number 2, with it, is give yourself plenty of time. Mm-hmm. Everyone's sermon process writing is different. We've talked about mine a little bit here on Practical Church Planting. But basically what I do in an ideal world, which we just changed it briefly but then we're going to change it back as a staff schedule, whatever, is on a Tuesday from 8 to 5 o'clock on my calendar, it says sermon prep. And that's it. And what I do is I work on, we're normally 4 or 5 or 6 weeks ahead, whatever. I'll work on that 4 or 5, 6 weeks ahead sermon. And then when I'm done that day, then I'll review for an hour that week's sermon.
Yep.
And that is all that's on my calendar. And for someone like me that wants to be productive and wants to feel like you're doing things or not getting behind or not being lazy or whatever, when you put it on your calendar that you have all day to do it, and I never spend all day on it. Mm-hmm. I never spend from 8 to 5 working on a sermon thing. But because I know that I do, I don't feel like I got to rush through it or go quick. And some weeks, as you know, are pretty simple. Things go well. Some weeks take longer. And I found in the past, the weeks that take longer and I was frustrated, I was like, well, I just need to finish this because I had 3 hours today and 3 hours that day, whatever. Yep. And it needs to be done. By giving myself plenty of time, there's no stress of like, oh, this is going to take a few extra hours and it's going to be okay because I've got the time to do it.
Yeah. Another thing to kind of go along with what you're just saying is if you're someone like myself, and it sounds like you I need to look, or I don't need to, but I want to look back at the end of the day. No, I need to. I need to look back at the end of the day and see that something was accomplished, or else that I get really bummed out. That is not a good day for me. And so that, like, as we said before, I've preached a few times, but that's not my job here. And so my sermon writing time is much longer than probably your sermon writing time. But I've had times where I didn't plan out that much time, and so it ends up kind of taking way longer than I think it's going to. And then I look back at the end of the day and say, man, I was planning to spend 3 hours, whatever it was on it, and I ended up having to spend 8 hours, and I'm still not done.
And you didn't do the other things you wanted to do.
Exactly. So I end up looking back, and even though technically I moved forward, it just feels like a totally non-productive day. And
I know this too, like if you're a church planner, you've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
This may mean that you can't do everything you want to do, but I would argue that this is one of the most important things you do, so you need to do it well. Now, at the same time, I shouldn't say that. Most church planters should not be spending 20 or more hours writing a sermon.
Sure.
Especially with the tools that we have today. If you do it every week, if you don't do it every week, that's different. But also you don't have the time to do 20 hours. And so make sure like the time that you're giving yourself is realistic. Like, I'm going to give myself 30 hours, and then if I happen to be done early, don't be unrealistic.
Right.
But give yourself maybe a little more time than you think that you need, so you're not stressed out, is what we're trying to say. So number 2, give yourself plenty of time. Number 3, something I also started doing this year when I started to guard my time better and when I started to give myself plenty of time, is I also started to make it fun. And here's what I mean. Like I don't drink soda that often, but like I'll have a Mountain Dew for lunch, or I'll bring something good for lunch, or I like Jersey Mike's. And so I'll plan to go to Jersey Mike's that day, or I'll have something planned for that day that I'm looking forward to doing or experiencing, which makes I got to write the sermon. The thought of like tomorrow's Tuesday, and I don't think anybody hates writing a sermon.
Sure.
But it's a drag, and it's like I hope I get it done, blah blah blah. But if you have something that you enjoy that you can reward yourself to do, it actually makes you look forward to maybe one of the days that's one of the more days that is a drag to you, because you don't know how it's going to turn out. But if you have something that you're excited about, it makes the day something that you actually might look forward to.
Yeah. No, I think that's good advice for anything you don't like doing, or that isn't your favorite thing doing. Another thing in regards to making it fun is, at least for me, there's always kind of a portion of the sermon I'm working on that is more fun to work on, I guess you could say. Like whether it's coming up with illustrations or stories, or not so much just the detailed part of it, And so focusing a little bit more time on those, or kind of remembering that, hey, those times are coming up. I'm not just literally going to be sitting here typing for 8 hours, but some of this, I get to come up with some stories, or walk around asking people about stories, things like that. To me, is a little bit more fun. So focusing more on kind of the fun parts that you like to do, or the parts that bring you a little bit of joy.
And as we're talking, bonus feature.
Oh my gosh.
We can't add 5 because we've already said this is going to be 4. And this is not really a point, but this is also something that I've started to do recently. And it makes it more fun, makes it more enjoyable. Is that I probably should look this up for the episode. Have you heard of the tomato timers things? There's this thing, I'll look it up after, and I'm probably getting it wrong, where basically that you can focus for 23 minutes at a time. It's something around that line. And so I started doing this because I've never been diagnosed with ADD, probably don't have it, but I don't always focus well, especially if I feel like I just came up with a good story, or I did a lot of good study, and I'm like, I deserve a break. I started on my phone scheduling for 23 minutes, where I know no matter what, no matter how far I get, I don't stop even for a minute until the timer beeps. And even then, sometimes I'm like, well, I'm all right in the middle of something, I don't want to stop. But it's actually, it breaks up the monotony of it a little bit. So I'll go 23 minutes and then take a 2-minute break. And I'll go 23 minutes again and take a 2-minute break. And it actually, as a side note, has actually made the process a little bit more enjoyable, because it doesn't feel like it's like 3 hours straight. Yeah. And then you feel bad every time you take a break because you didn't put it in there. So
yeah, there are different apps like that I think are kind of fun. I've never used one in this scenario, but I've used some of them in other kind of cases where it'll, some of them will disable everything else on your computer, so you can only focus on the one tab that's open. There are some which this might be a little bit dangerous to use for sermon writing, but I've seen for writing in general where I don't remember exactly how it's set up, but if you stop typing for a certain amount of time, it starts deleting what you typed. Wow. So you have to keep going. And basically it's to work through like writer's block. If you're stuck at a point, you're supposed to be able to keep working through it. But there's a bunch of things like that. And if you just Google like tips for productivity, or tips to stay focused.
I just remember that there was a timer that was in the shape of a tomato, and I think it was around 23 minutes, and I've started doing it, and it's been helpful. So give yourself some break in there.
Totally.
But all that to say, make it fun, make that day fun, make that time fun, so it's maybe not like so much of a drag when it comes up.
Yeah.
And then number 4, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, but we found it's really helpful. I found it's really helpful to work ahead. And I know everybody's different, and so I don't want to say this is good for everybody, but generally speaking, if you knew that the week of, you didn't have to work on that week's sermon, like you probably be a little bit maybe not stressed, but a little bit less tense. Like you feel a little bit less weight. And I'm not against like having a work week of, like last week I had to speak somewhere last minute and I had literally 2.5 hours to write a message and I wrote it and it was fine. I mean, it wasn't great. So it's not like I'm scared a week of, but I've just found even if you're only 1 week ahead, knowing that week you're not necessarily starting something from scratch you have to deliver on Sunday. It doesn't, like the whole like Sunday is coming type of thing, it doesn't weigh on you when you know you've already got something that you're basing off of. Yeah. And so I would just say, if you can, we've talked about this in previous episodes on our sermon episodes, try to find a way to get ahead so that the week of you're not working on that week's message. And so there's a little bit of leeway. And also too, when you're not working on that week's message, if you have a story, if you have someone you want to ask something about, you have time to get that information. Yeah. And when you're week of, especially if you work on it towards the end of the week, and let's say you had someone in your church who has a story that would fit well and you needed to ask them about it, or you needed to spend a couple more days looking up something, you actually have the ability to do it because you have a week or more before you have to give the message. Yeah,
this one's a little harder to relate with as someone who doesn't preach every week, obviously, but of the times I can say from the beginning to now, there's definitely been a difference of how long beforehand I started preparing. Yep. And I can say, like, especially in the first couple of times I preached where I waited, I guess, too long to start preparing and kind of did a lot of it, not last minute, but kind of close to last minute. I remember thinking a lot afterwards that I felt like it was okay, but it would have been a lot better if I would have spent a little more time on it. Yep. But that wasn't an option because of how late I started. So I think, give yourself more time, even if that means following the kind of, whatever we called it before, blueprint or whatever, before to stay ahead of time, I think is smart.
Yeah, but I think the episodes were 40 something or 50 something. We got some sermon episodes in there. We talked about this.
Yeah, but staying ahead, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and what's good too is that if you're new, especially if you haven't preached that often, I know there's probably this tendency of like, I can't work on another sermon until I give the one I have. Like, I'm going to get so confused.
Yeah, like I only have so much headspace, right. And
I'll just tell you, after you try it once, you'll realize it's not as confusing as you think. So just try it. And maybe you've never done it before, and you're like, that seems weird to me to work on another message that I haven't given. I promise it won't be confusing. And the benefit of it, too, is that you know where you're going. Like, if you're a few weeks ahead, like, what's been beneficial is you can actually say, hey, a week or two we're talking about this, so it gives people a reason to come back, but also it makes it so that you're not repeating all your stuff. Yeah. So when you're a couple weeks ahead, you're like, oh, wait, the week before I said this, and you have time to adjust things, whether you want to adjust that message or the one before or whatever, but it lets you know that at least that you're being different, that you're not saying the same thing every week. There's just a lot of benefits. Yeah. And I found that it makes the sermon process way less stressful week of if you're not working on that week's message. Reviewing it, yes, but not starting from scratch.
Yeah, totally.
And so those are 4 things you can do to enjoy the sermon writing process more. Guard your time, give yourself plenty of time, make it fun, and work ahead. So thanks for being with us today. Make sure you join the Practical Church Planning Facebook group, as we talked about.
Joining these wonderful polls.
That's right. I love polls, so I do them in there all the time. And if you have any questions, anything you want us to cover in a future episode, practicalplanting.com/questions, you can submit it there, and we'll be with you next time on Practical Church Planning. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planning, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planning, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planning on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.